So once again, good evening. My name is Kate DeAdder. I am a library associate with the Sonoma County History and Genealogy Library. And it really is our pleasure to have both Mary Carouba and Susan Hagen here tonight to speak about their book, Women at Ground Zero. This is the stories of courage and compassion, hopefully not so shiny, but they have done just a phenomenal job of going around and speaking with our first responders that really makes such a difference. And as we're celebrating 20 years since the event, this is just absolutely admirable that they are still able to take the time and be here with us. So we're very grateful. So just a little bit about myself. I was a flight attendant for American Airlines prior to working for the History and Genealogy Library. I began my career with American Airlines in 1995 and retired in 2017. So what we have here are some images. The middle image is the honor flag. The honor flag has traveled around the country many, many times. It came from Ground Zero and has gone to a lot of first responders memorials. On the far right is Sam. Sam was an explosive detection dog, and this was the 5-year anniversary, and he was coming back from Pennsylvania. And so he was there to keep us company and just really kind of a therapy dog on top of everything else. For the people, for Mary Carouba, both of the women are just absolutely exceptional. And it's really exciting to have them here. Mary's background, she's a popular speaker, but she's also been a comedian. She's an entertainer. She has been an investigator into social issues. And she infuses just a really exciting background and interest into the topic. We also have Susan Hagen here today. Susan was a freelance writer for many years. She began her career working to capture work with medical organizations, Kaiser in particular, and then ended up working as a firefighter in her local community with Freestone, and did that for several years before retiring from there. And the two of them have come up with just an incredible collaboration of stories and women, and how just tremendous the role of these first responders were for 9/11. And again, thank you for being here with us today. So with that, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and thank you.
Hello, I'm Mary Carouba, and this is my co-author, Susan Hagen.
Hello, everyone.
And we're completely thrilled to be here tonight. This is our first time talking on Zoom about the women at Ground Zero, and this is going to be a little different for us. So just bear, I'm sure we'll be as charming as we always are, but just bear with us while we sort of try out this new format for making our presentation. Susan?
Yes, I'm Susan Hagen, and I'm just really thrilled to be here with the Sonoma County Library because this is our hometown. And we've traveled all over the country over the last 20 years with our book. We've been back to the East Coast and spoken to numerous groups. And it just feels like it's appropriate to be coming home. I mean, we live here, but it's appropriate to be coming home and speaking to people we know, people we would like to know, and those who live in our community so that we can share this story with you.
And, you know, one thing that we want to say to you all is that the women at Ground Zero are so surprised that people still care so much about their stories. And it's been very healing for them, because I think one of the most difficult parts of responding to the World Trade Center after 9/11 for a lot of people was the complete lack of acknowledgement of their heroism. And that was certainly the case with the women. They received zero acknowledgement. In fact, this year, we noticed that a few shows are focusing on the women of 9/11, but as far as I can see, that's the first time in 20 years. So it's been a slow roll, but at least it's happening now. And it's very gratifying to the women and to us.
Let us tell you a little bit about how this whole project started. So we're both live in Sonoma County, and I was a volunteer firefighter at the firehouse in Freestone. And the joke there was that you could put any fire out in the district just by standing out in front of the firehouse with a hose, because it was such a small district. And Mary was an investigative social worker here in Sonoma County. And on 9/11, we were just stunned and, of course, glued to the TV like everybody else, watching this tragedy unfold just in disbelief.
And, you know, we were watching the news day and night, reading magazines, listening to radio shows, listening to TV shows. Like everybody else, we were just trying to get as much information as we could about this catastrophic event that had just taken over the United States and really the world. People the world over were in shock at the attacks of 9/11. And we started noticing as we're watching TV, as we're listening, we noticed that somehow the language has reverted back to like the 50s or the 60s. All the hard-won gains that women had made over the years, it was sort of like in the fear and chaos of 9/11, that recognition sort of vanished. And people started talking about the brave men, the brotherhood of the fire department, our brave guys, the men, our heroes. There was a lot of talk like that, and we were stunned that women seemed to be being left out of the national conversation about the new American hero. They seemed to be left out of that conversation completely.
Right. And so we started looking more closely whenever we were watching TV, buying Life magazine, and looking for specifically, where is a picture of a woman in uniform? Where is a woman being interviewed who's a police officer, not a policeman, or a firefighter, not a fireman? And we didn't see one image of a woman. Oh, I think we did see a woman directing traffic in one very short clip, but that was it. And so in my firehouse in Freestone, we were 50% women and 50% men. And you could go to any emergency call in Sonoma County and see women paramedics, sheriffs, highway patrol officers, police officers. So it just seemed like such a strange omission to me and to you, Mary.
Yes, and I sort of reacted by getting angry at the television set, as if that would do anything. Like the day Rudy Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York City at the time, stood on the rubble of the World Trade Center 4 days after the attacks, and he implored this large audience to stand and give a round of applause for the men we've lost and the men who are searching for survivors. Said it just like that. As women lay dead in the rubble behind him, we were certain of that, and women rescue workers, we were sure, had to be working frantically to find survivors, but you would never know that by the language we were hearing.
That's right. And so we happened to be watching that program together that night, and Mary just started screaming at the TV. Not that she hadn't done this before, but this was a particularly loud bout of screaming and expletives that came out about, where are the women? Why are you not talking about the women? Why are they not included?
Okay, but that it wasn't even as bad as when President Bush went down to the site a few days later, and this was really the catalyst for us writing the book. President Bush goes down to the site a few days after Rudy Giuliani made his misogynistic announcement, and he threw his arm around a male firefighter and said he had come all the way, from Washington to praise all the brave men involved in the rescue and recovery efforts. And the top of my head just about exploded at that point, and I started yelling at the TV set. And Susan is a very reasonable person. And I like to call myself passionate, but whatever. Susan is just much more even. So as I'm screaming at the TV, swearing my head off, Susan turns.
Yeah, I turned to Mary and I said, Mary, at some point you're going to have to let this go because there's nothing we can do about it. And when I said that, we both just stopped. I knew that a lie had just come out of my mouth. I knew that when I said there's nothing we can do about it, that was just a fatalistic comment. And we both kind of stopped and we looked at each other and said, hey, wait, maybe there is something we can do.
Well, the thing was, we both recognized something. It's interesting how the world will throw you together with people at a certain time in life when you're supposed to do something together. Because Susan and I both had experiences throughout our lifetime where we felt like, hey, that's an injustice, that's wrong, somebody needs to do something about that. But as we would think about what it would take to do something about that, whatever the thing was, and realized the time, the expense, the resources, we would sort of stand back and kind of let somebody else do it. And this was a moment in our lives where we both looked at each other and realized that if somebody's going to do something about this, why can't it be us? Why shouldn't it be us? And so we started talking about what we could do to address this problem.
And the book was born within just a few minutes of that realization. We said, you know, we could go to New York and find the women and interview them, and we could put it in a book. And then the name just came, Women at Ground Zero. I saw it. I saw black and white portraits. I saw the stories in their own words. And it was almost as if it was already there for us to just step into that process.
And, you know, at first I argued with Susan, oh, no, we can't have black and white. You have to have color photos. That was one of the best decisions we could have made, because there was something about those black and white photos that brought out the women's character and their features in a way that doesn't happen with color photographs. So, but anyway, let's go back. So we're sitting on the couch, we make a decision, and we reach across the couch and shake each other's hands, as corny as that is. And we made a commitment to write a book about the women heroes in New York called Women at Ground Zero. That was the upshot of the night. And we got on the computer and made hotel reservations and plane reservations that night. That's before Susan got a leave of absence from her writing gigs and before I got a leave of absence from my social worker job. But we were both so committed at this point that it was something that we had to do.
Right? We didn't want to wake up the next morning and say, oh, that was a great idea, but it's too hard. Because the truth is, you know, did we have enough money to go and do this? No. Did we have any contacts in New York? No. Did we have an agent or a publisher, or had either of us ever published a book? No.
Had either of us ever been to New York?
I had never been to
No.
New York.
But we made this conscious decision. I think it was really the right thing to do. We made a conscious decision not to ask any of the questions that a reasonable person would and probably should ask in a situation like this, because we knew we would talk ourselves out of it. We made the commitment to it before we started putting together the mechanics of it. Then we jumped on a plane. We ended up going to New York a few weeks after 9/11. And Susan and I both had this moment of panic on the plane where we sort of turned to each other and said, what if there are no women rescue workers? Like we had told the whole world. I have this philosophy that you should talk things into existence. So I had told the whole world. I'd done fundraising on stage using Susan's dirty old fire boot, passing it around to raise money for the Women at Ground Zero project. We had told the entire world. And now we're on this plane going, what if they don't have women rescue workers in New York?
Right. What if they didn't? I mean, New York is a very different animal than Sonoma County. And so we just decided, hey, it was a leap of faith. Our intentions are pure. If we get there and we don't find the women, then we've done the best we can, and we'll just chalk it up to being a great adventure.
So we get to New York, and it's so eerie because even though we're not New Yorkers and we don't know how it's supposed to be there, we know it's not supposed to be that quiet. We know that it's very unusual. The taxis aren't honking, cars aren't honking. There's cars out, there's people out, but it's quiet. And so we go to the police station. Now, I don't know what we thought these two little hicks from Sonoma County were going to go and like elbow Tom Brokaw out of the way to get interviews. I'm not sure, but we just boldly went right to the front door of the police department, and they boldly told us they had no interest in us whatsoever. And forget about telling the police department or the fire department that you want to speak to their women firefighters or police officers. That didn't go over big at all.
No. So those were closed doors right away. So what was it? Someone told us about a bar. Was that when you asked a cab driver?
I asked a taxi driver to take us to a bar near Ground Zero where women cops hang out after work, because I figured there's always got to be that bar. You know, at least there was on NYPD Blue. You know what I mean? Like that kind of cop bar. And this taxi driver did not even hesitate. He took us right down to Greenwich Village, this little underground bar called Ruby Fruits, and dropped us off.
Right. So we walk in, and you go down a few stairs, and then there's a bit of a landing. So we stand on the landing, and Mary, in her best California accent, says, excuse me, everyone." And the place just falls silent.
It's like those old, like the old 30s John Wayne movies where like the guy comes in the swinging doors of the bar and like the guy playing the piano stops and everybody in the bar turns and looks. It was exactly like that with this bar full of women cops all staring at Susan and I.
Right. I was horrified. I got to tell you, I was horrified. So then she says, if there's any women here who have been working at Ground Zero or were at Ground Zero on 9/11, we need to talk to you.
So after we make this startling announcement, 3 women come up to us. And I'll tell you something about New York women. Some of you in the audience, if you're from New York, you may know this. If you take a New York woman and make her a cop, now she's just got all kinds of instincts, right? She's got womanly instincts. She's got cop instincts. She can read you in a second. They're quick. And these women came like barreling up to us to check us out. And they basically said, what the hell are you doing in this bar asking about cops at Ground Zero?
Right. And so we had a woman from the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. There was a woman from the FBI. And then there was a New York City police officer. And they had their hands on their hips and they were ready to take us down. And so we just said, hey, we're from California. We've been watching the news. We haven't seen a single female rescue worker's face on any kind of national news. And we came because we want to make sure that women are not written out of history.
So we're explaining this to them. And all of a sudden I noticed Carol Parkner, she's one of the women in the book, and she was standing there on crutches with the other 2 women. And I noticed she's crying. And we asked her what. And she told us that just that day, she had been at her police precinct and been part of a photo op. You know, there's lots of those after a big catastrophe. The politicians all come out and the heads of city departments all come out and grandstand. And so anyway, there was a lot of gifts being given in the police department and the fire department. And the way it would work, unfortunately, is the gift will go to the chief, and then he pass it down, usually straight through down to the old boys club, and just bypass the women completely. And Carol Parkner, who was so injured from 9/11, you'll see photos of her in the movie that we show. You'll see a woman who's covered with dust, who is, first you'll see a photograph of her in uniform, it'll have her name, and then it'll show a photograph of her on 9/11 with 2 other people helping them get out. And because her injuries were so severe, she had to quit the only job she ever wanted, which was being a cop, and she was heartbroken over it. And here she is at this precinct event where one of her colleagues is getting a trip to Hawaii for himself and his entire family. But there's a little problem with the fact that he got it. Do you remember that, Susan?
Yeah, because he wasn't even there that day.
He wasn't even in New York on 9/11. He was on vacation with his family.
Right, right.
So she was crying, just feeling so unseen.
Yeah. And so she said, you guys, you got to come to my house for dinner. Remember? So we went to her house for dinner. We did an interview with her. But before that, our first interview was Lois Monge, the woman on the cover of the book, the most highly decorated firefighter in New York, women firefighter in New York at that time.
You know what? Should I show her picture?
I think let's wait because it'll come up.
Okay, never mind. Ignore me.
You'll see her in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she was our first interview. And how did we find her, Mary? Oh, you found her on what was the internet at that time, which was a very thin network.
Yeah. I don't remember, but what I do remember is that she had a very good friend from kindergarten that she had been friends with her whole life. And Lois Monge is like the toughest talking little piece of work you've ever met in your life. I mean, she's got a heart of gold. She's like the classic New Yorker, heart of gold firefighter, tough talking, you know, she's pretty amazing. And she, like Susan said, she was our first interview, and she came in the hotel room and she did not want to be there. She didn't want to come be interviewed. She had no interest whatsoever, but her friend from childhood had told her, don't you remember when we were in kindergarten and Mrs. Blah Blah was asking all the students what they wanted to be when they grew up. And when you said fireman, she said, "Oh, honey, only boys can grow up to be firemen, not girls." And so her friend told her, "Don't you want to set the story straight and let little girls know they can be firefighters too?" She was like, "Oh, damn it." So she came in and did the interview.
Yeah, she walked into our hotel room. She had on a cap and she like threw it down on the chair, and she took her jacket off and she threw it down on the chair. And she said, "I'm here to tell you my friggin' story, but I ain't here to cry on your friggin' shoulder."
Susan was scared.
She scared me. I mean, she was so tough. And, I was so nervous to begin with because I come from a very small town, a town of 3,000 people in the Sacramento Valley. I went to Cal Poly for college. Now I'm with the Freestone and Grayton fire departments in Sonoma County. And here I am, with the fire department of New York and the NYPD after the biggest terrorist attack ever on American soil. And so I was already feeling pretty insecure. And she walked in with that attitude. And I just thought, we aren't going to get anything out of her.
We both thought that. We both were not holding out a lot of hope that we would get anything from her.
I had been interviewing people as a journalist all my career, and I thought, this is one I'm going to get nothing.
Yeah. So we asked her one question. We said, "Can you tell us what happened that day?" And she proceeded to talk and cry, which she told us was the first time she had cried in decades. And I think she probably hasn't cried since either. And she told us the story about how that day she was on the way to her firehouse and she realized that she had to stop to pick up some food. You can't show up without food if it's your day to cook. And while she's going to get the food, she hears it come over the radio about a plane that's gone into the tower at the World Trade Center. And so she grabs the food and rushes to the firehouse and gets there just after the truck left with 7 of her colleagues, and none of them came back, not one of them. And that was the story that Lois told us.
That was her story. And from that day on, she had been down there digging for their remains. And I think we were there 3 weeks after 9/11, and she had been down there every day digging and digging, trying to find their remains, and still had not found any of them. And once we had that story, we kind of looked at each other and said, no matter how hard this gets, no matter how difficult or how many women we find, even if we have to self-publish this book and give it to each of these women and our parents, we're not going to stop until we get it done, because we could not take her story and throw it in the trash and say, this is just too hard.
And it's not like we thought the book was going to be any great success. I mean, I thought like 8 feminists in Berkeley would buy the book. So it was a true labor of love. And one of the first decisions that we made about the book is that we would donate 100% of the profits, just to completely clarify our intentions. Because after a catastrophe, there are so many hustlers trying to make a buck off of the tragedy. And so we wanted to be very clear. And I think that was helpful too.
Right. There were people down there trying to sell little vials of ash from ground zero for, $5 to put in their own pocket. It was just horrifying, some of the things that were happening, the way people were trying to make a buck off the back of this tragedy. So interviewing Lois and meeting the women in the bar, that began to open things up, and they began to tell us, oh, you need to interview Doreen Astatino. She was a dispatcher for the fire department over in Brooklyn. The dispatch office had no windows, and they were here in this room with all these phone calls coming in, could not see what was happening across the bridge, had no sense. It couldn't be described to them. And so they were calling for engines and ambulances and sending people in, and without really any idea of what was happening. So
and following their training, saying, stay put.
Right. Following their training. If there's something that happens at the World Trade Center, this is where you stage the engines, right in front of it, one behind the other. This is where the ambulance goes in. They were just following protocol, not knowing that they were sending people to their death.
And, it was amazing, some of the stories that we heard as we started to interview the women, and it became even more unbelievable that we hadn't seen any of their stories on like 2020, 60 Minutes, all of the different shows that were honoring men, even shows like Oprah Winfrey and Saturday Night Live that would have their whole audience be rescue workers, had all male rescue workers. So it was very intense in that way. And one of the things, I'm sorry, I got off track a little bit, but some of the stories that we heard was like Terry Tobin, who was just half a block away from the towers when the first plane hit. She grabbed some tennis shoes out of her trunk, put them on, put on a Kevlar helmet, which is designed to take a bullet. And you'll see a picture of her in the movie too, Terry Tobin holding a Kevlar helmet. So you get an idea of what she went through, because she was hit so hard in the back of the head with a flying projectile from the building or the plane that it split the Kevlar helmet in half and lodged in the back of her skull. She was still rescuing people in that condition. She has permanent hearing loss. She's lost every single one of her teeth in the years since because of the impact, the shock of being hit that hard. The dentist couldn't figure it out after 9/11 why all of her teeth seemed to be failing. It was because of the magnitude of that hit, basically shook all of her teeth loose. And so Terry went through an amazing amount and was still getting people out. At one point, when the second building came down, it was all dusty. She saw a guy's hand and she reached out and she grabbed it and she said to him, listen, just hang on. It's okay. I'm here for you. Like a good cop, I'm here for you. And when the dust cleared and she stood up, it was just an arm, not attached to anything. So she was traumatized and she's still rescuing people. When a shard of glass flies into her back, lodges in the middle of her back, and then finally the paramedics talked her into going and getting help.
Yeah. Another story that really stands out to me is Mercedes Rivera. She was an EMT working for a private ambulance company, and I believe she was 23 years old. She hadn't been on the job for very long. And when the towers came down, she and her partner found themselves and their ambulance kind of in the middle of everything. And so the debris rained down, it kind of beat against their ambulance, but they were able to get out. And so when when it stopped, the smoke stopped, they opened the doors and they just started calling people to come in. The people were coughing and choking and blinded, and they just pulled as many people into the ambulance as they could, started passing oxygen out, sharing an oxygen tank, washing out their eyes with water, and then drove them out. And it was no simple drive. It was around the debris, around people, around bodies, until they could get them out to safety. And then when they did get out to safety and unloaded the people, she looked at her partner and she said, Polly, we got to go back and get more people. We're going to have to.
Because he didn't want to go back. He didn't think they should go back. He thought it was too dangerous. And she was like, Polly, we have to.
Right. And she just said a little prayer. She said, Jesus, please let my parents know that I love them, but this is what I'm meant to do. And so they went in again and again and again, taking people out. So go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to me, she really represents what courage means, which is having your fear and going ahead and doing what you need to do anyway. It wasn't without fear.
There were a lot of people too at the time that did sort of less romantic heroism or rescue work. Like there were a lot of cops and firefighters that had to go out to what's called the Fresh Kills landfill. Horrible name. Fresh Kills landfill. That's been the name of it for a long time. And that's where like everything went from the site to be sorted through for body parts, for any little piece of flesh, for any little personal possession. And there were people that worked down at that. Jennifer Abramowitz, one of the women in the book who recently died because of what she was exposed to at 9/11, died of cancer. She was working there for 2 weeks before they found out that the filters they had given them for inside their mask didn't fit right and were ineffective. So for those 2 weeks, they were breathing in everything.
Mhm. So we ended up interviewing 30 women who had survived the terrorist attack on 9/11, police officers, paramedics, EMTs, Doreen, the dispatcher, police officers from the Port Authority as well, and a couple of others. And each time we interviewed someone, we saw kind of the same thing. They hadn't really been home. A lot of them had been sleeping at their stations or at their stations. They had been staying with the Red Cross. They were just working these long shifts on the rescue, well, no longer rescue, but recovery efforts. And so when they came into our quiet little hotel room and we made them a cup of tea and they sat down and were able to take a breath, they just unloaded their stories on us. Like Mary said, we didn't really have to ask more than one or two questions, and they just told the stories. And the interviews went for hours and hours. And we realized that we were kind of like an incident stress debriefing team, because I was a firefighter, so I was a peer with them. And Mary was a social worker, so she was the mental health professional. And they kept checking in with us. Is it okay to feel this way? Is it normal to feel this way? So we found that even though we went there sort of as journalists to get the stories, we found that our role was much more, and our relationships became so deep with those women and still are today, many of them.
Yeah, and we just fell in love with them, completely fell in love with them, because when women that are that tough and that accomplished are that vulnerable and that open with you, it really, it changed me. I know it changed me. And Susan, I think it changed you too.
Absolutely.
So we started talking a lot, after we did these interviews and we got to know them and we heard all of these stories, we started talking about like what we could do for them, maybe what we could do to sort of thank them for participating in the book.
And that's something that we'll tell you about toward the end of this program. But first, let's talk about what happened when we came home and we tried to find an agent and we tried to find a publisher, because this was not in the day of self-publishing. This was in the day where you had to have an agent and you had to have a publisher in order to get a book published. So we sent out, we really, again, didn't really know what we were doing. So we just got a book called The Writer's Market, and which lists all agents in the United States. And we just took the first 10 agents that were women's names who lived on the East Coast, who dealt in books about history or current events. And we sent out our query package and waited for the throngs of agents to come and invite us to be their clients.
Yeah, and we actually did get 2 agents.
We did.
So one of the things that we want to share with you is a little bit about the women in a film format. And this is sort of a self-narrated film. There's no talking on it, but there's written narration, and it's got photographs of the women, some photographs of 9/11, and sort of fleshing out these stories a little bit more. So Susan, are we ready to get started with that?
Yeah, I think we're ready to get started with that.
Okay, tell me if you see the movie starting.
Yes. Mary, you need to unmute yourself.
candle in your memory, though I don't know who you are. And when I think about your family, I wish upon a star. And I pray that they'll find peace someday. I pray they'll make it through. I'll light a candle in your memory to honor you. I'll light a candle for America. May we feel peace inside. We'll hold each other closer and wipe the tears we've cried. And I pray we'll bond together, and I pray that we'll pull through. I'll light a candle for America, for me and for you. And we will light the world with our light. I know we will light the world with our love, with our love. A light candle for humanity, for the good that's yet to come, as we overlook our differences and join now as one. And I pray we'll come out stronger in this world I'm dreaming of. A light candle for humanity, to be a world living in love. And we will light the world with our love. Know that we can. We will light the world with our love. Every day and every way we will light. We will light the world with our love. I know that we can. I know that we will light. We will light the world with our love. A light candle for humanity, for all the good that's yet to come, as we overlook our differences and join now as one. And I pray we'll come out stronger in this world I'm dreaming of. A light candle for humanity, to be a world living in love. A light candle. A light candle. A light candle. Out of the ashes grew a seed, out of pain and human need. There grew a bloom that proved to be stronger than the darkness. Within the rubble there shone a light
that could not be put out. There was kindness and mercy, forgiveness and compassion as we reached out to hold each other's hands. There was giving and caring, something greater we were sharing. From the ashes there grew a seed of love. From despair there grew a tree. Out of pain, community. Well, it was mighty and it was strong, offering its shelter. From the desert, there sprang to life a place of refuge amidst the fire. A little healing that proved more powerful than fear. There was kindness and mercy, forgiveness and compassion as we reached out to hold each other's hands. There was giving and caring, something greater we were sharing. From the ashes that grew a seed of love. Now we won't forget the heroes, the strangers whose faces we now know, but we'll honor them forever by planting seeds wherever we go. Let there be kindness, mercy, forgiveness, and compassion as we reach out and hold each other's hands. Let there be giving and caring, something greater we are sharing. From the ashes, let us grow a seed of love. Let there be kindness, mercy, forgiveness, and compassion as we reach out to hold each other's hands. Let there be giving and caring, something greater we are sharing. From the ashes, let us grow a seed of love. From the ashes, let us grow a seed of love.
Thank you so much for being with us as we share that. You know, I've seen that 100 times and it still just gets me every time. We spent hundreds of hours working on that way back 18, 19, 20 years ago, and seeing it again today, it just brings everything up for me. The smell of ground zero, the silence, the way that people just kind of ducked every time a plane went over. And we came away from there so changed, our hearts so opened, and just so feeling so loving and compassionate toward all the women who shared their stories with us, that we just wanted to do something for them. And we started to joke, well, why don't we just rent a bus and bring them all out to California, just bring them out to Sonoma County and put them in a hot tub and pamper them. And, you know, we were just joking about that.
Well, we were goofing around a lot because of the way they are in New York. It's very different than California. So we were like, we're going to mess with them and like get their auras read and have them get massages, and which we did do all of that because we wanted to provide them with the quintessentially California experience.
So at one point, we were just kind of joking about getting the bus. And then we looked at each other, kind of like that moment on the couch, and said, hey, why don't we do it? What would it take to bring 35 rescue workers from New York to Sonoma County? And so we thought, well, it worked out so good the way we did the book, just kind of by the seat of our pants, which did come out on the first anniversary of 9/11. We did get picked up by Penguin Putnam. So we thought that worked out so well. Why not just take another leap of faith? So we sent out an invitation to all the women and invited them for a week of rest and recognition in Sonoma County, all expenses paid.
Yeah, first class trip in the wine country. And we give them this whole list of, would you be interested in this or interested in that? Or, like balloon rides, or, we just had a whole list of everything. And now, first of all, we thought most of the women wouldn't come because a lot of them were afraid of planes after 9/11. A lot of them really didn't leave New York a lot. So we thought a lot of them wouldn't come. However, they all said yes. They all responded yes, and we almost left the country. It was so scary because now 35 women were coming to California for this all expense paid trip. I think in about 6 months. I think that
we were said we would pay for. So we went out to lunch. We took a friend of ours out to lunch who's a professional fundraiser, and we told her what we had done. And she was just mind boggled by what we had done. And she said, you guys, you're going to have to raise at least $100,000, maybe $150,000 to pull this off. And we thought, how are we going to do this?
But I was thinking, well, listen, okay, $100,000, how difficult could that be? Now, I've been a social worker and sort of a social services person all my life. So, okay, maybe I'm not completely keyed into the ways of the business world, but I figured, hey, it's only $100,000. Let's get the 10 wealthiest families in Sonoma County, because we have some extremely wealthy families here, very famous people. Let's get the 10 wealthiest families to give us only $10,000 each. That was our big.
So we wrote 10 letters and sent them out. We never heard a thing back. And as it turned out, it wasn't the 10 wealthiest families in Sonoma County who funded this trip. It was people just like you and me and the people that are on this call. We started going to every Rotary meeting, Seropticus meeting, anybody that had money that we could come and speak and then pass around. Still, I was passing around my fire boot as a collection tray, and people started giving us money. We went on KSRO and made an appeal, and people would send in money. This was all before social media. So it was really word of mouth.
And it was so crazy during that time that we were trying to raise the money to bring them out, because we were trying anything. Like I heard that Lily Tomlin was going to be at a local theater and that they had this VIP thing before the show where you could pay to go have a photograph with her. So like a weird stalker, I snuck into the VIP thing and passed her the book. And there was a little note in there. And I said, hey, listen, we need help, blah, blah, blah. In this note, give me a call at this number. Okay, but we were so busy at the time that we weren't really telling each other everything that we were doing. So when Lily Tomlin called the number I gave her and she got Susan and said it's Lily Tomlin, what did you say, Susan?
I thought it was Mary just fooling around because I didn't even know she'd done this. And so she's like, hello, this is Lily Tomlin. And I said, oh, hey, Lily, how you doing? And she said, I'm doing fine. I'm calling you because, and I was just stunned. You know what? She's really not that funny in real life. It's very serious. And she ended up actually not helping us.
Well, she gave us the name of somebody who was
right.
like richer than, so she gave us the name of an extremely wealthy friend. And so I called this extremely wealthy friend and she wanted to brainstorm with me on the phone, like help me come up with some ideas. And I'm thinking, well, actually, the only thing I want to brainstorm is you giving us some cash, but it really turned out that except for Robin Williams, I went to some winery event at a winery owned by his cousin. And I gave him a book with the note to Robin Williams. Robin Williams called back his wife did, and they donated the money for all the women to fly out to California. But besides Robin Williams, that was it. It was all just everyday people. One guy sent us a check for $4. I don't know why. People just did what they could.
Mary, let's show some pictures of the trip. So
Okay.
while Mary's pulling that up, so a year later, just about a year later in November, we brought 35 female rescue workers from New York City to a place that is just about the farthest you can get from New York in every single way you can imagine, and that was Healdsburg. We brought them to Healdsburg, and we put them up in the Healdsburg Hotel and gave them a week of rest and recognition. Mary, can you get it up?
Oh, you can't see it? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience with our technological travails. Okay.
All right.
And we just put out the word sort of casually. We were going to do this project and bring these women heroes out from New York. And we made an alliance with the chief of police of Healdsburg, who was the first female chief of police, Susan Jones. Can you see when I point like this with the,
Yes.
Yeah, so that's Susan Jones. And these are all like town council people and different folks coming together to put together these notebooks for the women. And between all the volunteers, we ended up raising over $140,000.
And this group of people came to us and said, oh, we want to do a bike run as a fundraiser for Women at Ground Zero. And so we said, great, that'll be wonderful. They were going to have a barbecue and a band. So we went out for it. We thought, oh, how nice. People are going to be riding their bikes through the hills of Sonoma. It'd be beautiful. No, they were like Harley motorcycles. It was a big motorcycle club.
With a bunch of guys that looked like this. It was so cute. We thought it was like a bicycle club. We were going out and it's a bunch of guys and they had these t-shirts made, salute to the women at Ground Zero. It was just an amazing thing.
But they raised a lot of money.
And different groups like the Seroptimus group, they put together fundraisers. Everybody helped us out.
And it's a good thing that we only had 35 women come because they completely filled up a Sonoma County Airport Express bus, which we used every day to drive them to all the different events that we had planned for them.
And there were like hundreds of people signed up to volunteer doing different things like give massages, take people out, give a private ride to someone who wanted to see the Budweiser factory or the haunted house. What's that haunted house, Susan, down in San Jose? You know, and we had women that wanted to see different things. And so people would sign up to participate. This was a big endeavor. And this is the women showing up at Hotel Healdsburg, which is a very, very posh hotel.
And they said that they wanted to be incognito. They said, well, we want to come and not be noticed. But come on, it's the Healdsburg Square, and they've got the big FDNY and NYPD.
Yeah, they come dressed like this. Yeah, that's their idea of low profile.
Low profile, right. And then, go ahead, Mary.
And we told them, especially people like Lois, like if you don't want to draw attention, don't speak. Like, don't open your mouth at all because those accents.
Yeah. And I just wanted to point out, if you can see my pointer back on that picture, Mary.
Yeah.
Right here, this is Jennifer Abramowitz signing into the hotel. And she's the detective that we lost this year due to 9/11 related cancer.
Yeah. She had a great trip. And this was a banquet that we put together. We had invited Hillary Clinton, who at the time was, I think, Secretary of State of New York, and she helped us a lot with the project. And so she did a nice video for the women, and we had first responders from all over Sonoma County at this event helping out.
We had so many volunteers coming in from all the different agencies in Sonoma County that like one person would bring the dinner roll and the other person would bring the butter, and somebody would bring the glass and set it down, and somebody else would bring the water and pour it, because we couldn't say no to all the people who really wanted to be there and really wanted to help. It was just an incredible night.
Yeah. And people came and sang for us and entertained us. Diane Amos, Pine Sol lady from TV, is a brilliant comedian. She came, the singer Suede, both came on their own dime to be part of this.
And little did we know when we got the tickets to fly the women out here to San Francisco that they were on the very last flight of national airlines, because once that plane landed, they went out of business. And they
Bankrupt.
told us, bankrupt. Nope, your return tickets are no good. No other airline would honor the tickets. And so once again, here I am up on the left corner, and Brenda Berkman from the fire department going on TV asking who is going to rescue the rescue workers, because they're all trapped here in California with no way home.
And it was funny because some of the women were out looking at real estate, and they were saying, we'll just stay here. This is fantastic. So it was a real funny element that was unexpectedly added to the trip. The radio stations would call us every morning for an update as to had anybody rescued the rescue workers yet.
And they did end up getting rescued, because if you could go back to that slide, Mary, you contacted Hillary Clinton's office, who was their senator at the time, and asked, is there some way that you can help us get the women back home to New York? And she called the president of JetBlue, and then called back and said JetBlue is going to fly them all home.
Okay, but what was funny about that is that I had talked to the president of JetBlue, and he had turned me down cold only a couple weeks before. And then after Hillary Clinton called him and he called me, both he and I pretended that we had never talked to each other.
I love it.
He was like, I'm outraged about this that I hear from my friend Hillary Clinton. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much for caring. So it was great. Okay.
So, you know, they were cowering when they heard a plane go over. They didn't like getting on a plane. And these four said, you know, we got to get over this. It's not good for our image. We don't want to be afraid of a plane. So do you have any planes here in Sonoma County that we can jump out of?
Yeah, a New Yorker's idea of therapy. And so they went up in full uniform, no guns, hugged, dusted themselves off, and called it done.
Called it done. That was a New Yorker's form of therapy.
Yep.
Yeah. We also had a day where they went and visited all the schools in Healdsburg, and from every grade, from preschool all the way up to high school. And here's Lois on the left. She didn't bring her uniform because she wasn't going to do the school thing. But then she remembered, oh yeah, my teacher said I could only boys could be firemen. So she borrowed a sweatshirt from Chief Rocky Jones and went ahead and talked to the kids at school.
And of course, you know, what's so classic is that she's amazing with children. And for being supposedly such a curmudgeon, even the kids know she's just total heart of gold.
And I'd like to also, and I'm sorry, Mary, to keep asking you to go back, but in that picture, the other woman that you see right in the center, that's Regina Wilson from the Fire Department of New York. And this month, Regina is on the cover of the Smithsonian Magazine, representing the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. So if you get a chance to look at that, it's a beautiful picture and quite a tribute.
She's also the first female firefighter in New York to be president of the Vulcan Society, which is an association of Black firefighters, very old historical group, and she was the first female president. And it was so cute. You know, some of these women to this day still have pen pals from that day. And even this woman, Nancy Ramus, she's so shy, she can't ever get up and speak. But for this, she made an exception for this class of English as a second language. She went in and she spoke to them in Spanish. Patty Lucci.
And I just love this picture. I just love that picture. They were in line for a hug. They lined up to get a hug from the women. So sweet.
Yeah. And this was a high school, and the principal of the school said she had never, ever seen the students that quiet. And this is Rose Arce from CNN, who was in the book.
And you can see the focus and concentration on their face.
Yep. And here are the women abusing a child, apparently.
I always say they're demonstrating a forcible entry tool.
Yeah. And then we did this book reading at Spreckles Theater, and it was another one of those really scary things where we decided to have this book reading, but we were just running around wild, trying to keep everything together and make everything happen. And we didn't do RSVPs. We just sort of put the word out and then just crossed our fingers and prayed somebody would show up.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be standing room only. It's a good thing the place was full of firefighters because we were breaking every fire law there was. People sitting in the aisles and everything. And this is the women coming out on stage in their dress uniforms, getting a 10-minute standing ovation before they'd even started.
And here's the women taking turns reading from the book, their stories. Janice Ocheski. And this is a picture of them coming and sitting back down after they've read and listening to each other's stories because they hadn't read the book and they hadn't talked to each other about their stories. They just came out to have a good time in California. They were meeting for the first time. And this is the expressions that we would see on their faces as they're hearing each other's stories.
And because a lot of them, even to this day, have never read the book. And a lot of them at this point had not even looked inside the book. They couldn't. You know how sometimes if you have like a horrible breakup or something, you can't even drive past the person's house. Like it's just too much to even, you don't even want to visit it. Well, this is how they were. And so many of them heard the other stories for the first time that night. And on the right, this is Jessica with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And then Brenda Berkman and Patty Lucci. And this is them at the end getting another standing ovation. And although the quality of this picture isn't great, this is one of my favorite pictures because these are the faces of women who are being acknowledged for the first time for their heroism. And they had to come all the way across the country to Sonoma County from New York to be acknowledged. And I think that's what you see in their faces there.
Afterwards, we had a book signing and we said, when you guys are tired, just get up from the table and walk away and we'll call it a night. But they stayed until the last person had a book signed. And I think it was well over 1 a.m. before we were finished. Tracy Lewis there from the fire department. And after, go ahead, Mary.
No, go ahead.
As I say, afterwards, they were hungry, so they wanted to go out for pizza. Well, you can't find pizza in Sonoma County after 1 o'clock in the morning. And so they were just saying, how can you people live here? This is barbaric. No pizza.
They were like, you people are freaking barbarians. What is this? They just couldn't get over it. This was the next day out in Armstrong Woods. And it was so cute because so many of them said they'd never been out in nature. And Bonnie Gibfried, who I'm going to show you a picture of her on the next frame, said that she had never seen a tree up close. Never seen a tree up close. So this is what happens when you put a New Yorker like Bonnie in the woods. Wait, that's not it. Here it is.
There it is. Yeah.
And you know what's interesting is that Bonnie since then has become like a nature-based sort of counselor doing healing work with people. So that was the start of a real shift in her life.
We had numerous wineries who provided wonderful meals, 5-star chefs that provided food. Next slide.
Yeah, I was pretty worried they were just going to be drunk for the whole week because so many wineries wanted to help. So.
Yeah, the wine was free flowing, even here in the Benzinger Wine Cave, which is a 3-mile long underground cave where Benzinger stores their wine out in, I think it's Glen Ellen.
And that was the dinner we had with them on the last night. It was truly special. And this is us taking a goodbye shot right before they're about to get on the bus to go back to New York.
To the airport, yeah.
And we didn't realize it, but different groups in Sonoma County had gotten together, veterans groups, police, fire, and put together a salute going down the street for the women as they left. And for these women, after this week of receiving so much love and so much acknowledgement, so much respect, they just fell apart. when they saw that. I just snapped a quick picture on the bus.
Corey Reynolds, some of you might know Corey. She was our first scholarship recipient. It turned out that we raised almost $150,000 and didn't need all of it. And so we started a scholarship fund at the Santa Rosa Junior College, which continues to offer 3 scholarships every semester for students who are in the police, fire, and paramedic academy. Corey was our first recipient, and she is now captain at Santa Rosa Fire Department.
Yeah, that's an amazing outcome. And this was us at the airport thanking JetBlue and Senator Clinton for arranging this flight. And this was us saying our goodbyes. And then I said to Susan, where can we find the most unattractive picture of me imaginable to close the show with? So here you have it. This is us after the women got on the plane, and we were just broken up. Well, except for Wendy, she was a little drunk, I think, but all that wine all week. But we were just broken up. And what was interesting is that we didn't notice for years when we had this photo in the show that the sign above said dreams of flight. And that's exactly what has happened ever since.
I think too, in that picture, there was like this huge sense of relief. The book was published, the trip was over, and we thought it was done. That's what we thought. We thought, oh, it's over. Now we go back to our life. But there was no normal life to go back to. This has been a part of our life since that day and will continue to be. And one thing I want to share is an email that I got today from the New York City Police Department saying, we are putting together a video that's called New York NYPD Women at Ground Zero, and we're wondering if we can use the pictures from your book. So 20 years later, that is a complete turnaround from having the door slammed in our face when we asked, can we interview your women?
Oh yeah, and even when we were in Sonoma County trying to raise funds for the trip, we went to the Santa Rosa Police Department and tried to partner with them as we had with Healdsburg Police Department, but they told us that they didn't support special interest groups.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine what their reaction would have been if we went into their office and said, we wrote a book about 35 heroes, and we would like to bring all these men out from New York to California. They would be throwing parades for them. No one would ever think, well, why is it all men? Is that a special interest group? Yeah. And so this has been a long, hard slog.
Mary, I think that we're about at the end of our time, and we want to have a little bit of time for some questions and answers.
Yes.
So we want to thank you so much for having us here, and let's go to Kate and see if she has some questions for us from the audience.
Hi, give me just a second, get that started. And yes, there have been some questions that have come in. And I love that you've paid so much attention to the New York aspect of this collection, because my first place that I lived in New York City was about 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. So really quite tremendous. So one of the questions that came in is actually about the photographer. How did you hook up with the photographer? How did you make this decision? Because the images in this book just really pull it together.
That's a great question. The photographer is Joyce Benna, and she lives in Oakland. And Joyce and I had worked together for years doing projects for Kaiser Permanente. And so when it came time to find a photographer for this book, we invited Joyce to go with us. And yeah, she did a great job.
Great job. And just stayed completely nonplussed with all the craziness of New York. She just plodded right through.
That's right.
Perfect. How long did you spend in New York when you went?
Well, we were there for several weeks the first time, and then we went back several times, probably a few months altogether.
I think it was a total of about 2 months. Yeah.
We did a lot on the phone because we both had full-time jobs. So when we came back and we were trying to finish the book, we would be on the phone from 4 to 7 in the morning, calling back to New York and then going to our jobs. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
these women were not available by email. They did not have desk jobs. They were out on the pile digging, and it was really hard to connect with them.
One time Susan called Rose Arcee. Rose Arcee is like the quintessential fast talking New Yorker, CNN correspondent, you know. So she called to find out where we should meet her at Ground Zero. And so I see Susan on the phone, and then Susan hangs up the phone and she just looks stunned. And Susan looked at me and said, she was talking so fast, I don't know what she said. And then she just hung up. That's what it's like dealing with New Yorkers when you're not used to it.
It happened a lot.
There's a bit of a change, yes. So this is from one of our patrons, and let's see. So I have your book. It was at your Sonoma County presentation many years ago. Will there be possibly a follow-up book with the women that you highlighted?
You know, we thought about that a lot, and we thought about doing something for the 20-year anniversary, but in the end, we decided against it. We just didn't have the energy for it in the same way we did for the original project. And Susan and I have both gone on to do very different things in our careers. So our careers sort of diverged. So it just didn't really make sense.
Mhm.
Susan, would you say that's accurate?
I would say that's a very good portrayal.
Okay.
And so one of the other questions that is being asked is about the original interviews and how were they archived? How were they preserved?
Susan, what's the kind of tape that we have those on? We have them on those.
We just have them on cassette tapes. We didn't know what we were doing. We went out with a little tape recorder and we got them on cassette tape. And then we came home and transcribed them. And so we have the transcriptions. But one of the things that was really funny about transcribing the tapes, again, about how fast they talk, and I'm thinking about Rocky Jones, who was the chief of one of the firehouses down near Ground Zero. And she talked so fast that when I was trying to transcribe her tape, I had to slow the speed way down so that she sounded, you know, like a Californian. And so then you would hear my question, which was, well, how did it feel? So yeah, we transcribed the tapes ourselves and with the help of a friend, and then we went straight into production with the book.
And we still have those, right? They didn't burn in my fire.
No, we still have them.
My house burned down 4 years ago in the big fires up here, but luckily a lot of the women at Ground Zero stuff was in storage, thankfully.
That is fortunate. So what are the other questions? Let's see, how many weeks? Lots of greetings from around, wow, from Philadelphia and several other places. You've definitely gathered some attention today.
Oh, Philadelphia, I love it.
So this is how much time had passed from 9/11 until the first visit that you took?
3
I
weeks.
think it was 3
About
weeks.
3 weeks?
Yeah, 3 weeks.
It was still completely crazy. Like nothing was normal. It was still like everybody was right in the throes of it.
The fires, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The day that we went down to Ground Zero, one of the cops that we interviewed, she got us in, sort of snuck us in. And that was the day that the cops and the firefighters got into a big fist fight because the mayor had ordered the firefighters to leave. And the firefighters are saying they won't go, they won't leave anyone behind. But the city is saying, but you have to get back to work. And they ended up having like a huge fist fight. So it was wild, wild west out there. People were just dealing with this chaos of emotion. And so it was a real intense time, that first trip, huh, Susan?
Right, and the fires were still burning. The fires were still burning deep in the pile, and they were still trying to find remains. So it was, it was a huge crime scene, but it was also, like one of the women in our show said, it was a huge graveyard as well.
And what was so weird was people were saying a lot at that time that we were there that there was a weird smell in the air, that they couldn't identify it. But from spending time in India, where they have outdoor crematoriums, it's that's the smell. And so there was just, even if you didn't know that's exactly what it was, there was something about that smell that just set your teeth on edge. And that lasted for a long time in New York.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So this one is from an ambitious young woman in emergency healthcare. How did you push yourselves to complete the necessary work for this project? Did you feel daunted about it possibly not working?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question.
I was scared to death the whole time. This is the truth. You know, I am a small town girl. I was working at a small town fire department. I mean, now I live in Occidental, so I haven't grown that much. But it was terrifying to go toward the seat of a disaster when everyone else is leaving, to get on a plane just a few weeks after 9/11. To tell people, Mary told everybody we were writing this book, and Mary, don't tell everybody, because if it doesn't work, you know, then we'll lose face. But so everybody knew we were doing it. We had so much support, and we had never done it before. So there was fear for physical safety. There was fear of failure. And as I said before, I was so self-conscious and insecure about coming to New York City and dealing with these big city fire and police agencies. Yes, we were daunted.
Money. That's the other thing. This was 20 years ago, right? We're both working, and the way that we financed this project is we put all our credit cards on a table and stacked them all up and called each one and saw what the balance was on each one, added all that available credit, and that was our budget. So
that was our budget.
There were financial considerations too. One reason that we don't have more women in the book is we just didn't have the money to spend more time and do more. We had to have a cutoff point.
Right, and our cutoff was 30 women. And I want to say, and also the 3 stories of the women who died. A lot of people don't know that there were 3 rescue workers who died that day. EMT Yamel Marino, Kathy Mazza from the Port Authority Police Department, and Moira Smith from the NYPD. And in fact, the first funeral of a 9/11 rescue worker was Yamel Marino. And probably no one saw that or knew anything about that.
Yeah.
So as follow-up, with the women that you were able to speak with, how many of them are you still in contact with, and how do you feel that they are recognizing the 20th anniversary?
Well, you know, we asked that we have had different invitations around this time of year. We always do, to like speak here or speak there. And then we invite the women to come do that with us if the situation warrants it. And this year, a couple of the people we asked said no. You know, they're not looking to revisit it. They're not looking to talk about it. And that's their personal choice to make. But I think it's one of those hurts that goes so deep. It's like when somebody dies that you desperately love, you know, you just you never quite get over that, you know? And so I think that they deal with it, they move forward, but boy, what a heartbreak. The things they saw, you know, I was a social worker in Child Protective Services. And so I struggle my whole life with the images in my head from what I saw and the horrible things that people can do to each other. And so it's sort of stuck in there. I have to always work with it. And I think these women, Susan, would you say that this is sort of a defining aspect of their life, is having lived through 9/11?
Yeah, I would agree. And it's interesting because there's one group of women who have taken what happened to them on 9/11 and they have forged ahead, like Terry Tobin and Regina Wilson and Kim Royster, who are now chiefs of their departments and are still working long past their retirement age because there's work to be done and they're committed to it. And this has driven them. And then there's others who have pulled away, others who have said, I'm not going to let this define me. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to associate with it. I just want to get on with my personal life. There were some who retired afterwards because they just couldn't stay with it, didn't want to. There were others who retired because their injuries would not allow them to continue working, and they were crushed by that. Those who were forced to retire because of injuries were crushed. That's all they could do.
Yep.
Also add that except for Jennifer Abramowitz, who we lost this year, all of the rest of them are alive. All the rest of the ones that are in our book are still alive 20 years later.
And you know, it's interesting when people ask, how are the women doing? Which is a very important question. How are the women doing? There's really no way to answer that collectively, because they're doing how all humans are doing. Some of them are doing well because they've gotten help and done some therapy and dealt with their feelings. Some have shoved all their feelings down and packed it down with alcohol and other substances, and they're not in great shape. Others have used it as a spiritual experience. I mean, it runs the gamut of how people are doing after 9/11. Wouldn't you say, Susan?
Absolutely. That's
And I'll tell you my own personal philosophy that I really learned from all this is that a catastrophe of this nature doesn't change people so much as it makes them more of who they already were to begin with. So if you sort of felt sorry for yourself and just felt like a victim, you were really going to feel that after 9/11. But if you're the type you just sort of take it on the chin and keep moving forward, that's how you dealt with 9/11. So there were a lot of different responses.
right.
So for the final question tonight, has Oprah Winfrey invited you to interview?
Don't even get started on me with Oprah Winfrey, because I'm so irritated with Oprah Winfrey. So many people reached out to her. People were like, I personally know her cousin's brother's chauffeur or whatever. People were always telling us they had some lead to Oprah Winfrey. Nobody could believe that we hadn't been on Oprah Winfrey. So everybody kept pushing it, but just never happened.
No, no. And in fact, when she did a tribute to the rescue workers on 9/11, they were all male,
All male.
whole stage full of men.
No. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
How she
Well, this-
missed us, I don't know.
Yeah. Oprah, come on, Oprah. Come on. We're right here, Oprah.
I know.
Well, this Sonoma County Library is just so grateful that you took the time to work with us tonight. This presentation has just been absolutely phenomenal. The feedback that we've received through the question and answers, thank you so much for doing this. And then to quote one of my old girlfriends, Betty Ong, life is too short for bad wine. And this was her back like, 1997. So please enjoy your night. And thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing just these tremendous memories. We really appreciate that you're here.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone who came and joined us tonight. It really means a lot.
And we love the library. The library has been so wonderful to us. Libraries all over since the beginning of this project, and especially in Sonoma County, they have really supported this project. So we appreciate you guys a lot.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Bye,
Okay.
Good
everyone.
night.
Bye, Susie.
Bye. Bye, Mary.
Bye, Kate.
Bye, Kate. Bye, Monica.
Good night.